But I do have Tom Cruise, and I had this crazy idea. You know, I shot almost all of Swingers just with the camera on my shoulder. And, you know, I have a short attention span. Even on a film that's dialogue-driven like Swingers, I was constantly moving the camera and trying to just keep it as visually interesting as you possibly could when it's just people talking. And then there's one scene in Swingers where I pulled out a tripod and locked off the camera and didn't pan or tilt or do anything. And that's when Jon Favreau's on the phone trying to call the woman he met, and he keeps dialing over and over again and getting her machine.
Hi, this is Nikki. Leave a message.
Hi, Nikki, this is Mike again. I just called because it sounded like your machine might have cut me off before I finished leaving my number.
You know, and there was no other coverage. Like, that was it. I just said, I'm gonna make the audience just sit there and squirm, and in a movie where otherwise the camera sort of is just loose and moving, and that I'm just gonna force you, I'm not gonna give you any distractions. It's just locked off. Here's the thing, when you're making an independent movie, you don't have a chance to sort of cover yourself. You have to commit to how you're gonna tell a particular scene, and you shoot it that one way, and that's all you have in the editing room. So there was no plan B for the phone call scene where I was like, I also shot it handheld and shaky. I was like, no, every scene got shot one way and one way only. I had decided pretty far in advance that that would be different than everything else in the movie. Matt Damon going into the Gare du Nord when he's thinking of leaving Franca Potente, and he's looking up at the board of where the different trains are going. And I would say the reason that shot stands out is because we didn't have permission to shoot that. I didn't have the support of the studio to shoot it. I didn't have permission from Paris to shoot it. Again, because I'd come from making a little independent film like Swingers, I was no stranger to just stealing shots. And in that case, I told Matt, like, we're gonna go inside the train station and we're just gonna steal this. And we gotta get in and out of there. And the thing is, because Matt had done Good Will Hunting by then, and he'd done The Talented Mr. Ripley, there were some people who might recognize him, and, you know, and it was, I had a camera, so it was like we had to be really fast. And so there's a kind of a shaky quality to that scene. And so when people think of Bourne Identity and they think of this sort of, it sort of pioneered this shaky camera, you know, aesthetic. It's really the sequels that did more shaky camera, but the aesthetic was born, no pun intended, from necessity in that shot. Movies, you know, are not shot in chronological order. There's not necessarily always even an intelligence behind the order in which things are shot. Like in the case of Mr. and Mrs. Smith, we were shooting in a residential neighborhood, and there were some rules about how many days in a particular quarter someone could rent their house for a film. It has nothing to do with what makes sense in terms of the best practice for the movie. It's just dealing with the rules of Pasadena, California. But it meant that like 3 weeks into the shoot, I was shooting something earlier than I might otherwise have shot, which was Brad Pitt racing up to the house. He's doing this sort of frog march up to the front door, and I'm following up to the house, and I'm looking at it going, I'm making a comedy. Like, I wasn't sure the tone of the movie until that shot.
Hey, John.
Hey, Bill.
If you look at early press for Mr. and Mrs. Smith, like, you know, during production, they were calling it a thriller. And in that moment, and luckily that moment was like week 3, only because of these weird rules about Pasadena, it dawned on me I was making a comedy. And from that point on, I was making a romantic comedy. And it affected all the decisions I made after that, and it was because of that one shot. And by the way, like, I pivoted and was like, I'm making a romantic comedy. Angie didn't pivot with me. She was still making a psychosexual thriller, and we had a lot of friction on the set because I literally pivoted right in that moment. It just, I'll never forget, like, watching that on the monitor and going, I know the movie. This one you're never gonna guess, because it's the most boring shot in the whole movie, which is when Tom Cruise is in Brendan Gleeson's office at the beginning of the movie.
You misunderstand, Major. I didn't ask you here to sell me. I want you to sell the invasion.
Okay.
You know, it was a very expensive set we built. We brought Brendan Gleeson in for a couple of days of shooting. It really wasn't working very well. And I could sort of tell from Brendan Gleeson's attitude, he was like, oh, these these dumb American movies that come to London and they, and it's like you do it for the paycheck and it's like they just want to, all they care about is action. And I could just, like, it wasn't good enough. We got into the editing of it and it's not working. And we're like, we should reshoot it, but we didn't have the money to reshoot it because the set was like a $1 million set. And I had this crazy idea. I said, what if I just reshoot? Because I didn't even think we'd get Brendan Gleeson back because he had such attitude about, I could just tell he was like these, because he's like a Shakespearean actor and he's like these commercial American movies, because all these big American action movies go to London. And so I could tell they have a kind of attitude about the kind of movies we go make there. I was like, but I do have Tom Cruise. What if I reshoot just Tom's side of the scene and superimpose him over his old self? Because I don't have the set, but he's sitting down. Brendan was moving around, but Tom was sitting. And I was like, I could just film him and put him over his old self, and I can't change anything Brendan says. I could script all new lines for Tom that have to work with what Brendan does. And Tom came into the editing room, and I filmed him with my iPhone, and we just figured out a scene that would work with existing performances we had of Brendan. We just cut the stuff from the iPhone in, and then I went back and shot Tom with a real film camera and superimposed him over his old self. The whole thing of I'm a coward and I don't go to the front line wasn't there in the original version of the scene.
Blood. Not so much as a paper cut.
And it's a fantastic scene. Tom is flying an airplane. He's gonna go to the back to open the door to throw out the drugs. And I'm flying in a helicopter. I'm not piloting the helicopter, but I'm filming from a helicopter that's going alongside the airplane. And we're filming Tom, and he's alone in the airplane. He gets up and leaves the front of the airplane to go to the back. And I just was like, this is the friggin' craziest thing. I'm just like, this is big. This is big and exciting. And I want to make movies that are exciting. Visually exciting, character-wise exciting, something you haven't seen before. And, I'd never seen the pilot leave the cockpit and go to the back of the airplane. And now nobody's flying the airplane and it's like 100 feet above the ground. I'd probably say the opening shot of the movie where Matt Damon's in therapy. You're in the presence of a movie star when you can just put the camera on him. He's just sitting there silently, for 10 seconds, and you're already leaning in. Given how kinetic my movies are, you'd probably think I would have picked, wild, crazy shot where I hung the camera off of something, and instead, for pretty much everything I just described to you, they're all like the very staid, locked off shots.
I spoke to Denis Villeneuve recently, and all his films are, huge scale stuff, but all the shots he picked were very human moments. I think that's because, what are these big action stories like without grounding them in some sort of human emotion, right?
Yeah, I guess so, yeah. Okay, now I feel better about the shots I picked. The opening shot of Avatar, the first Avatar. Seeing that in IMAX 3D, and I'm remembering it as the opening shot. Maybe it's not the opening shot, but it was where they're, all the pods and you're floating, and I was like, I'd never seen anything like that.
Is that from a standpoint of you're kind of watching it thinking, how has James Cameron done this?
Yeah, just out of jealousy.
For more directors picking some favourite shots from their movies, check out our videos with Denis Villeneuve and Ridley Scott.